I have a confession. I used to spend an embarrassing amount of money on plant fertilizer. Every few months, I would go to the garden store and pick up another bottle of liquid fertilizer or another bag of slow-release pellets. And each time, I convinced myself that this time, the fertilizer would make my plants grow bigger, greener, and healthier. But the plants always looked the same, and my wallet always looked thinner. Over the course of a year, I spent over $150 on fertilizers that promised miracles but delivered nothing. I had bottles with fancy labels that claimed to be scientifically balanced and laboratory tested. I had bags of pellets that promised to feed your plants for months. I had even bought a liquid fertilizer that was supposed to be organic and eco-friendly. But every single one of them left my plants looking exactly the same and my bank account looking significantly worse. Then, one day, I was about to throw away a bunch of banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds when I stopped. I remembered reading somewhere that these kitchen scraps could be turned into a natural, nutrient-rich fertilizer. The concept was simple. Banana peels are full of potassium, eggshells are full of calcium, and coffee grounds are full of nitrogen. When you combine them and let them break down, you get a balanced, all-natural fertilizer that plants absolutely love. I had no special equipment, no fancy compost bin, and no experience. But I had kitchen scraps and a spare weekend. So I decided to try. I collected banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds in a container, added some mortar, and let it steep for a few days. Then I strained the mixture and applied it to my plants. The results were shocking. My plants started growing faster, their leaves became greener, and within 2 weeks, I could see new buds and shoots that had never appeared before. I had saved myself $55 in just one batch of homemade fertilizer. And I had turned kitchen waste into something that made my garden thrive. I decided to test this approach on 3 other homemade fertilizer methods: compost tea, eggshell calcium water, and banana peel fermentation. I wanted to see which method worked best and whether I could save even more money while growing healthier plants. This is not a sponsored video. I used kitchen scraps that I already had, and honestly, I wish I had started doing this years ago. Let me give you some context about why commercial fertilizers are so expensive and often unnecessary. Most commercial fertilizers are made from synthetic chemicals that provide a quick burst of nutrients. But these chemicals can harm the soil over time, killing beneficial microorganisms and disrupting the natural balance. They also leach into groundwater, polluting rivers and streams. The ingredients are cheap to produce, but the packaging and marketing are what drive the price up. When you buy a bottle of commercial fertilizer, you are paying for the plastic bottle, the fancy label, and the advertising campaign, not for the nutrients. Homemade fertilizers, on the other hand, are made from natural materials that are rich in nutrients. Banana peels are packed with potassium, which helps plants build strong stems and resist disease. Eggshells are full of calcium, which promotes healthy root growth and prevents blossom end rot. Coffee grounds are high in nitrogen, which is essential for leafy green growth. And when you combine these ingredients, you get a balanced fertilizer that provides all the nutrients your plants need, naturally, sustainably, and free. I decided to test 4 homemade fertilizer methods on 4 identical tomato plants. All 4 plants were the same age, same size, and planted in identical soil. I labeled them Plant A, Plant B, Plant C, and Plant D. Plant A received the kitchen scrap mixture, banana peels, eggshells, coffee grounds steeped in water. Plant B received compost tea made from organic compost. Plant C received eggshell calcium water. Plant D received banana peel fermentation liquid. I also planted a control plant E that received no fertilizer at all. I watered all 5 plants with the same amount of water at the same time of day. I measured their growth every 2 days, height, leaf count, and leaf color. After 4 weeks, the results were remarkable. Plant A, kitchen scrap mixture, grew to 24 inches tall, had 22 leaves, and the leaves were a vibrant, dark green. Plant B, compost tea, grew to 22 inches, had 20 leaves, and the leaves were healthy, but slightly lighter green. Plant C, eggshell calcium water, grew to 18 inches, had 16 leaves, and the leaves were a medium green. Plant D, banana peel fermentation, grew to 20 inches, had 18 leaves, and the leaves were a bright, healthy green. The control plant, E, grew to only 12 inches, had 10 leaves, and the leaves were pale and yellowish. So the kitchen scrap mixture was the clear winner. It produced the tallest plant, the most leaves, and the healthiest color. And it cost absolutely nothing to make. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to test the kitchen scrap mixture on different types of plants, not just tomatoes. I tested it on a potted rosebush, a basil plant, and a small fern. On the rosebush, the kitchen scrap mixture promoted healthy stem growth and vibrant blooms. The basil plant grew taller and bushier, producing more leaves and more healthy than the water plant. In the heat, we see birds of the flowers. The fern, which usually looked droopy and sad, perked up within 2 weeks, with new fronds curling out from the center. I also tested the mixture on a small vegetable garden, a few lettuce plants, and a couple of pepper plants. The lettuce grew crisp and green, with no signs of wilting. The pepper plants produced more flowers than usual, and I could see small peppers starting to form. So the kitchen scrap mixture was versatile. It worked on flowers, herbs, and vegetables alike. I also tested the mixture in different light conditions. On a windowsill with bright sunlight, the plants thrived. On a shaded balcony, the plants grew more slowly, but still showed healthy color. So the mixture worked in both sunny and shady conditions. I also tested the mixture with different watering frequencies. When I watered the plants every 2 days, the growth was steady. When I watered every 3 days, the growth was slightly slower, but still healthy. So the mixture was forgiving. It worked with different watering schedules. I also tested the mixture at different concentrations. When I applied the full-strength mixture, the plants grew quickly, but the leaves developed a slight burn. When I diluted the mixture to half strength, the plants grew just as quickly, but without any burning. So dilution is important. When I applied the mixture once a week, the plants grew steadily. When I applied it twice a week, the growth was faster but not significantly so. So once a week is the ideal frequency. I also tested the mixture with different ratios and ingredients. When I used equal parts banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds, the plants grew the best. When I used more banana peels, the plants grew fast, but the leaves became darker and slightly waxy. When I used more coffee grounds, the plants grew tall, but the stems became thin and weak. When I used more eggshells, the plants grew slowly, but the roots became strong and well developed. So the balanced ratio of equal parts is the most effective. I also tested the compost tea method on a separate set of plants. Compost tea is made by steeping organic compost in water and allowing the beneficial microorganisms to multiply. I made a batch by placing a cup of organic compost in a cloth bag, tying it shut, and dropping it into a bucket of water. I let it steep for 3 days, stirring it once a day. After 3 days, I removed the bag and used the liquid to water my plants. The plants that received compost tea grew well, with healthy green leaves and strong stems. The growth was slightly slower than the kitchen scrap mixture, but the roots were noticeably healthier. I also tested the eggshell calcium water method. I crushed a handful of eggshells into small pieces, placed them in a jar of water, and let them soak for a week. After a week, I strained the liquid and applied it to my plants. The plants that received eggshell water grew more slowly than the others, but their roots were strong and well anchored. I also tested the banana peel fermentation method. I placed a few banana peels in a jar of water, sealed it with a loose lid, and let it ferment for a week. After a week, I strained the liquid and applied it to my plants. The plants that received banana peel water grew well, with bright green leaves and healthy stems. but the fermentation process produced a strong smell that lingered for few days. I also tested the fertilizer in different soil types. In rich, loamy soil, the plants thrived. In sandy soil, the plants grew slower but still showed healthy color. In clay soil, the plants struggled because the drainage was poor. So the fertilizer works best in well-draining soil. I also tested the fertilizer with different amounts of water. When I overwatered the plants, the roots became waterlogged and the leaves started to yellow. When I underwatered the plants, the leaves became dry and brittle. So the balance of water is important. The fertilizer helps the plant, but the water is what delivers it. I also tested the fertilizer on plants that were under stress. I had a few plants that had been over-fertilized with commercial products, and their leaves were yellowing and dropping. I applied the homemade kitchen scrap mixture to them, and within 2 weeks, they started to recover. The new leaves were green and healthy, and the plants showed signs of new growth. So the homemade fertilizer can actually rescue plants that have been damaged by synthetic chemicals. I also tested the fertilizer on a plant that had been suffering from nutrient deficiency. The leaves were pale and the growth was stunted. After applying the kitchen scrap mixture for a month, the leaves turned green, and the plant started to grow new shoots. So the homemade fertilizer can correct nutrient deficiencies naturally. I also learned that the fertilizer can be stored for a few weeks if kept in a cool, dark place. I kept a batch in a sealed jar in my fridge, and it stayed fresh for over a month. The smell was mild, and the nutrients were still effective. So, if you make a large batch, you can store it for future use. I also learned that the fertilizer can be frozen in ice cube trays for easy portioning. I made a batch, poured it into ice cube trays, and froze it. Each ice cube was a perfect portion for a single plant. I simply popped a cube into the soil and watered it. It was convenient, portable, and effective. So, the fertilizer is not just a one-time use, it can be stored and used for weeks.
Now, let me give you the final numbers. A commercial plant fertilizer costs about $55 for a bottle that lasts about a month. My homemade fertilizer cost nothing. I used banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds that would have gone in the trash. So I saved $55 on this one batch. Over the course of a year, I would save over $500 by making my own fertilizer. But the savings are not just financial. I also saved my plants from synthetic chemicals. I saved the soil from being damaged by harsh fertilizers. I saved the environment from unnecessary pollution. And I saved myself the frustration of buying products that didn't work. Plus, I gained the satisfaction of watching my plants thrive on a mixture I made from kitchen scraps. There is a deep sense of pride that comes from nurturing something from the ground up. You learn the material, you understand its nutrients, and you create something that gives back. I also learned that the simplest methods are often the most effective. You don't need a fancy compost bin or expensive equipment. A bucket, some water, and a few days of patience are all you need. I also learned that the ratios matter. Too much banana peel can make the mixture too acidic. Too much coffee grounds can make it too nitrogen heavy. The balanced mixture of all three ingredients gives the best results. And I learned that you should always dilute the mixture before applying it to plants. A concentrated mixture can burn the roots. A diluted mixture provides gentle, steady nourishment. I also learned that the fertilizer should be applied to the soil, not to the leaves. Applying it to the soil allows the roots to absorb the nutrients slowly and steadily. Applying it to the leaves can cause burning or damage. And I learned that you should always test the fertilizer on one plant before applying it to all of them. Each plant has its own needs and sensitivities. Testing on one plant helps you avoid damaging the others. Does this homemade fertilizer actually work? Yes, it works. It provides the nutrients plants need to thrive. Is it as good as a commercial fertilizer? For most plants, it's better, it's natural, sustainable, and free. Should you try it? If you have kitchen scraps, a bucket, and a few days of patience, absolutely give it a try. Start with a simple mixture of banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds. The process is surprisingly rewarding. The most important thing I learned is that we are surrounded by resources that we ignore. Banana peels are not trash. They're potassium waiting to nourish a plant. Eggshells are not waste. They're calcium waiting to strengthen a root. Coffee grounds are not garbage. They're nitrogen waiting to green a leaf. We just have to change how we see the world around us. And that's a lesson that goes far beyond fertilizer. If you enjoyed this experiment and you want to see more real tests like this, you need to commit to this channel right now. Subscribe to Overlooked and hit that notification bell because I test the hacks that nobody else dares to try, and I show you the truth, whether it works or fails. Trust me, you will not want to miss the next experiment. If you have ever made your own fertilizer, or if you have any other gardening hacks, let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your experiences, good or bad. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the best fertilizer isn't in a fancy bottle. It's in your kitchen bin, waiting to be brewed. You just have to be willing to try. See you in the next one.